Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited to share my conversation today with Alexandra Suchman. She helps mission-driven businesses and nonprofits break through the day-to-day stress and reach new levels of success through simple systems, organizing techniques, and planning strategies. You can think of her as a kind of a closet organizer meets tune-up mechanic meets personal trainer all in one. Her common sense approaches to process improvement, organizational change, personalized coaching, and skill-based management workshops help clients develop the processes they need. And I have to say, as somebody who spent her entire career in marketing, and myself, obviously, I have come to just be absolutely neurotic about systems over the last 8 years with Hera Hub. I've learned so much, and now it's like my favorite topic to talk about. So welcome to the show today, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I feel like if I can leave one legacy in my life, it's to have words like operations and process and systems have people not run away or roll their eyes or go into shutdown mode, but actually see that they're important and not intimidating.
Exactly. Good. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to share that message through today's conversation. Before we get to your business and what you do, take us back and tell us about you.
Yeah. I live in Washington, D.C. now, but actually grew up in Rochester, New York, and was always very motivated by helping people. That was what made me feel the most fulfilled and happy, and did a lot of different things helping people, and thought that I wanted to go into mental health and be a psychologist or social worker or something. Yeah. So I went to college and studied psychology. I went to college up in Maine, and did a couple internships when I was in college with mental health providers, and realized very quickly that I'm a high empath, and it was very hard for me to not emotionally take on other people's pain, and realized I would burn out very quickly if I went the mental health route. So I just said, okay, well, what if I look at it at a higher level, and got very drawn to public health and public policy. So after I finished college and I moved down to the DC area, I got a job at the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University as a research study coordinator. And it was a pediatric mental health study. So the subject matter was really interesting, and it was an intervention for pediatricians and nurse practitioners and physician assistants who were primarily with children on how to start talking to their patients and families about mental health and just making them more comfortable. And it was very operational, the job. It was to study logistics. So, how are we going to recruit patients, and how are we going to enter the data, and how do we hire people to do the data collection, and coordinating between the investigators and the people doing the data analysis. And I loved being in that mission control center type role where you're pulling all of the pieces together. But I realized that academia was not for me. It was a little too slow moving. It was too slow moving. Yeah. There were these people who, the families that were part of the intervention, had a lot of issues, and the intervention was really useful, but it was the sort of thing where it's, you do it first on a very small test population, and then you need to run all sorts of analyses to show if the study is valid, and efficacious, and
Mhm.
that takes several years. And then if that works, somebody else has to replicate the study. And I was like, no, these families need help. It needs to be faster. I
Yeah.
need to move on. And so that's when I went into the public policy world and public health. And being in Washington, D.C., that's sort of what a lot of people do. And I work for an association that worked with the membership was state governments, but working with the Medicaid directors and other health and human service programs.
Mhm.
And loved the public policy world, loved how, again, it was connecting a lot of pieces. You can't just look at healthcare issues without also thinking about poverty and education and housing and food and nutrition. And I liked the intersection of all of those different areas. So after doing that for a couple of years, I went back and got my master's degree in public policy, where I got a really strong foundation in research methods and especially qualitative research and collecting good information and really telling a story. A lot of research is really getting to the bottom of the story. It's almost like investigative journalism into some really big questions. And I loved that.
I want to pause there, Alex, and ask
Yeah.
a few questions, if I may, because this whole world of public policy is so new to me. To be honest, it sounds
Mm-hmm.
crazy, but I'm all the way out here in San Diego, and so we don't live and breathe this as you do in Washington, D.C. I have just gotten more involved in the National Association of Women Business Owners,
Mm-hmm.
fondly known as NABO. And with that, NABO does a fair bit of advocacy work at the state and federal level to, I don't want to say push agendas, but, make sure that, our voice is being heard in regards to, laws that are being, passed around women-owned
Mm-hmm.
businesses, whatnot. So I'm learning a bit through that. And I've sat in on a few meetings, just mostly state level, California level things, and listening to folks who really fought hard, for example, to get the bill here passed in California to mandate all publicly traded companies to have one woman on their board, which is
Mm-hmm.
passing by the end of this year, or going into effect rather by the end of this year. And just to listen to how much, like, years of work and fighting, to
Mm-hmm.
advance a particular agenda. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. That would drive me. I'm just going to be frank. I'm not cut out for that work, because I would get
Mm-hmm.
so frustrated, as you alluded to a bit in your primary role.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not even, I guess, asking a question. I'm like in awe of
Yeah.
how honestly anything gets done.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's something that's so interesting about DC is not that many people, are from here. People have moved here, and a lot of people move here, obviously because of the government, but most people don't realize how much the government does affect everybody's life. All of these decisions that are made regarding, how businesses can run, what has to go into education programs, who can hold certain types of jobs, and what type of requirements for credentials or certifications are held, how our cars work, everything. The government, state, local, federal, affect us in so many different ways. And being in DC, you really understand that, because you meet all these people who moved here specifically because they're so passionate about whichever of those issues they're interested in. And it's really fascinating. I never thought that I would be so interested in how the sausage gets made, but it's very slow moving, and that's certainly frustrating, but it's not for the lack of really smart, dedicated people working behind the scenes. And I'm not talking about the political process at all, and the elected officials and all that, but just the people at the think tanks and the research firms and the associations and the law firms and the nonprofit organizations, there are so many really brilliant, passionate people who are trying to deal with some of these challenges that we all face in our life.
Absolutely. And then present that research information, everything that you've gathered, to the people that are making the ultimate decision to pass something or not to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Yeah.
much educating has to go on, and trying to, frankly, I would imagine, I'm using kind of the wrong words here, but tackle these extremely busy people that are being pulled in 18,000 directions and get their attention so your research can be heard.
Yeah. And that's sort of, I have such respect for those people and love living amongst them, and my friends and my husband, my family members, all of my previous colleagues are all of that world. But and that is sort of a perfect segue into the next stage of my career. After working in the public policy and the research and evaluation field as a government contractor at a very small business, I sort of realized that all of these people who are so brilliant and so passionate and really want to make a big difference in the world, the way a lot of these workplaces are, whether it's their businesses or nonprofits, everyone's so focused on that big picture that no one's really thinking about how do you actually do the work and how do you set up for success. Mm-hmm. And just observing the things that were making my job more difficult, or that my colleagues were stressed out about, or the problems that came up, the errors, or things that were overlooked and really came back to bite us in the behind at the small company, they were all very predictable and very preventable. And so I got into operations management just by saying, like, oh, it would be really helpful if we had this template, or if we did this checklist, or if we had a few people trained on how to do this, or if we organized the shared drive a certain way so everybody knew where to find what they were looking for. It started out really small things that I was sort of like, everybody's life would be easier, and we wouldn't spend time being frustrated and complaining, and we could just do the work. And I would do something little and see the direct benefit, and then do something else. And as the company I work for started to grow, and it grew pretty quickly. When I started, it was 5 people. And after a couple of years, it was in the 20s, and I was there for 8 years. By the time I left, it was more than 50 people. Operations becomes more and more important, and I became the manager of operations and business development, thinking about how do you scale things in that back end to make sure that everybody is set up for success, and realized that that's the level of problem solving I loved. Like you said, you want things to happen quickly, and on that level, especially in smaller workplaces, things can happen really quickly. That's not to say they're easy, but to say you can make really noticeable difference in people's day-to-day work lives, and I love that, and realized that that's what I was so passionate about.
That's fantastic. I wonder if you have the same disease as I do, where you go everywhere and you see all the inefficiencies in their process, and you're like, if they only did this, and if they only changed this thing, it's like constant.
I grew up in a very artsy fartsy family, and grew up a dancer, and have always been so into the performing arts. And about a year ago, my husband and I went up to New York to see a play. And in the theater district, there's dozens, maybe hundreds of theaters all crammed in. They all have, they're all right next to each other and have similar start times. So you just have crowds of people in these very busy streets, and no one knows where they're supposed to go, and there are no signs. And like the theater owners and the police and, the store owners, they deal with this every single day. How has nobody thought to put up signs or have somebody outside pointing people in the right direction? It's like mass chaos. And to me, it's almost physically painful because I see like there's a solution and it's so easy and it's not expensive. And why is nobody doing it?
Exactly. You do have the disease I have. What do we call that?
Yes. I mean, I think of it as just wanting to make people's lives easier.
Yeah.
It's like the low-hanging fruit. People are so stressed out, and there's a lot of little things that people can do to eliminate, not the big stressors. Big things are always going to happen, but those little moments of your day where you feel really frustrated, those can add up and make, be the tipping point between a good day and a bad day, or having a good interaction with a coworker or client or a bad interaction. So, a lot of my work is how do you deal with that low-hanging fruit and just eliminate some of these very predictable stressors.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of folks, it's even dramatic as your business works or it doesn't, right? I mean, some of these things are so critical, software and processes and documentation to the health of a business, especially a business that's trying to grow, such as the business you were working with for 8 years, to go from 5 to 50 employees is pretty significant. So, Alex, I want to get to this point where you wake up one morning and you say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. That's how it went down, right? I'm just kidding.
No, I never had that moment. I wish I did. It was almost the flip side of it. So I just got very burnt out at that organization. I think for people, I'm wondering if you were in this position too ever, when you're the type of person that can just see inefficiencies and you want to make things better and you're a very competent person and can take things on, eventually it's very easy to get taken for granted in that position and be like the fixer for everything. And so I, was essentially doing multiple people's jobs. And it was a small business. I understand why they couldn't hire lots and lots of people for the operation side of things. But it just became too much and I totally burnt out and sort of felt like there was no way to change my role there. So I left and decided I needed a couple months to just figure out what I wanted to do next. Figuring I would find another operations management or director of operations type role at some other nonprofit or small business in the area. And I did some informational interviews, and a lot of research, and realized that because I love working with these mission-driven, issue-oriented people, a lot of the workplaces would have that very reactionary, not really prioritizing, operations and strategic action. And I didn't want to get in the same position. And so I was going to all types of networking events and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and went to a coffee networking event at the Hera Hub in DC and met all of these amazing women who recognized what their talents and gifts to the world were and started businesses. And it was sort of like, maybe I could do this. And doing it, having my own business would give me total control over how much I was working and how much stress I was taking on and what the balance between work and not work in my life would be. And it almost felt like, while it was very exciting and yes, I'm going to go on this big adventure of starting my business, it kind of felt like a last resort for if I wanted to try to do this type of work and maintain my sanity and health, as a full, well-rounded human being. And so it was right after that introduction to Hera Hub that I said, I'm going to try to do
this. Yeah, no, I've heard that so many times where folks will come across Hera Hub or, the co-working space in their city. And it's kind of that moment where a lot of folks say to themselves, you know what, I don't have to do this alone. Like I can I can work alone together with other people who are also working alone, really finding your tribe and feeling confident that you're not going to, again, be really on your own, so to speak, that you'll have that support. So I'm so glad you found us. So you've had your business going on 3 years now. The company is AIS Collaborations. And talk a little bit about the work you're doing, Alex, now with your clients. Maybe give us, one or two examples of some of the folks that you've worked with.
Yeah. It's been a little over 2.5 years, which is very crazy. It goes by so fast. So one of my clients who at this point I've been working with the longest, probably almost a year and a half, she's a teacher, then stayed at home to have her kids and started just as a side business. If you're selling your house and you want to get rid of like half of your furniture and a couple sets of dishes, miscellaneous stuff, she's sort of a virtual estate sales business. It started just as a hobby because she thought it was fun to list things, and she has a very good eye for what's high quality and what will sell, and knew some people who worked at some antique stores. And it very quickly, demand grew and grew, and it turned into a business. And she'd be running multiple properties at the same time. And also, where her heart and soul is the aspect where she connects with local charities and community organizations that work with homeless families or victims of domestic violence, and gives a lot of household items to them to help people who need it. So she was at the point where in order to run multiple properties at the same time, she needed to hire more people, and she needed to think about how to standardize what was done. So regardless of who was working at what property, she knew it was all done according to her standards, and people were getting the level of service they wanted. So it was helping her think about where can she put some process in place, and how can she write out the expectations for how she wants things to be done, and where can things be either automated or at least streamlined, in her whole business process, from from taking people on as clients to getting the stuff ready to be sold, to reaching out to buyers and all the marketing that goes along with it. And so I got to know her very well. We actually become very good friends, and just getting to know the very intimate details of her business, and what her vision was, and how does she actually make her vision happen, so the business grows in the way that she wanted it to. That's been so rewarding, because now she has several people working for her, and has a bunch of new ideas she's working towards.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like really kind of soup to nuts, so to speak, just helping somebody think through every aspect of their business. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with potential software implementation, also hiring practices. Do you get involved in helping folks think through who they need and what those job descriptions are and things of that nature?
Yeah, and a lot of it too is, I think one of the strengths of being an operations person is you're sort of a Jill of many trades, and I know enough about IT and finance and marketing and stuff to understand how it's going to impact the business, and how to help the business think about what they're looking for in each of those areas. But then I have several people that I work with who are real subject matter experts and professionals in each of those areas, and so sometimes I almost feel like I'm a translator or ambassador between my client and these other professionals, because if you're really well versed in IT and systems and software, sometimes it's hard to talk to people that don't have any expertise, because you're used to the jargon, and sometimes it's very hard. If for my clients or a small business or a nonprofit, it's sort of intimidating, and so they don't want to seem stupid, or they don't necessarily know how to articulate what they need. So sometimes they will just, fall for a sales pitch, or buy the first thing that's suggested to them, but it's not necessarily a good fit. And so I'll help people think through, like, what are you really looking for, and how do you make a good decision, and how do you make sure that this is something that's going to fit within your culture and your workflow, and your own, personal work style and your teams, so that you don't, I think a lot of technology, they're great solutions, but maybe to somebody else's problem. And it's important to think through specifically what your problem is before you make a decision.
Yeah, I would say that's been one of the biggest learning curves for us at Hera Hub as we've grown is those software solutions and what is the right solution, what's overkill, and also, is there a solution that can do 2 or 3 or 4 things versus you start to accumulate all these various platforms, and thank God for things like Zapier that can, help software talk to each other and dump information over. But, you start
but
to look
also
at your
for
business.
a small business, each one of these things is now, everything's now a subscription service.
Exactly.
And so $10 a month here, $20 a month here,
Yeah.
and that really adds up. So
it does. I mean, I would guess, we're working on like probably 15 to 20 platforms, and some are $10 a month and some are a couple $100 a month. It's like there's a lot out there, and then they're constantly changing, and integration changes, or a new platform comes on the market that's 10 times better, and you need to then decide if you're going to adopt that, and then moving over and getting everybody from your team to use that platform. It's a lifetime of exploring and making decisions. So I am so glad that you were there for your clients to help them through that process, because it is absolutely daunting. Well, Alex, what is on the horizon for your business in the upcoming year or so?
I'm actually getting ready to launch a new package called Conquer the Chaos and Grow. And it's for small businesses that have been around a little bit, and have seen some initial success, but are now, small business success can almost feel like a curse at some point, because you feel like you figured it out and all of a sudden the bottom drops out from underneath you. And you have too many clients and you can't keep track of them all, or you need to hire people, but you don't have as much control over how things are going. And there's just this endless to-do list of, I need to tackle this and this and this. And so it's an intensive consulting and coaching package to just break through some of those problems and then figure out how to get past that and put together, a clear plan of action for how to grow strategically, but with the growth being on the operations, the back end side, how to make sure that everything is taken care of to support the business as it continues to do what it's doing.
I love that. It does sometimes feel like chaos, I will admit. Oh my goodness. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, any types of clients that you're looking forward to working with? Are you branching maybe into different industries or different types of businesses?
I wish I could narrow it down some. It would certainly make my marketing easier. I love working with people who are more driven by, the service and helping people side of things, and are more the creative thinkers. Like I said, I have this very artsy background, and so people who are more right-brained, those are people that love the creative aspect of it and love the fulfilling a need, but not so much the logistics and details and infrastructure pieces. So rather than industry, it's more a mindset of the business owner. Because I feel like I'm ambassador translator between right brain people and left brain principles. So people who are ready to acknowledge that structure doesn't have to limit creativity. It just limits making sure that you're putting the creativity into the aspects of your business that really need it, and not silly little things that should be pretty routine.
I like that. That's a great phrase. I also love your phrase, do good work better, or perhaps your tagline. I'm not sure how you utilize it, but I really do appreciate that. Well, Let's give our listeners an opportunity to connect with you if they would like to do that. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, probably check out my website because then there's links to all of my social media and there's my blog and there's a contact page where you can send me an email or give me a call. And that is just AIScollaborations.com. And there's all kinds of good stuff on there. So it'd be great if people want to check it out.
Perfect. Sounds good. Awesome, Alex. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been really wonderful to talk to you. And I'm just so grateful that you founded Hera Hub because it's an amazing community.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.